When my daughter walked across the graduation stage, she smiled, waved, and thanked her family for supporting her. I sat in the back row, clapping quietly, my name never mentioned. I had paid every single dollar of her tuition, working 2 jobs, selling my home, living under her roof like a polite guest. But what Emily didn't know was that I had one final gift for her. An envelope that would change the way everyone in that room saw her, and the way she would see me for the rest of her life. My name is Linda. I'm 62 years old, and for most of my life, my identity has been built around one thing, being Emily's mother. Raising her on my own wasn't easy. Her father left before her first birthday, and from then on, I became both parents. I worked 2 jobs, one as a cashier at a local grocery store, the other cleaning offices at night. I came home exhausted, but one look at Emily's sleeping face made every ache feel worth it. Over the years, I made choices that others thought were extreme. I sold the small house I'd bought in my 30s. It was the place where Emily took her first steps, where we celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes. But as college grew closer and tuition bills started to arrive, the house became my sacrifice. I used every dollar of equity, every penny of savings to make sure she could attend the university of her dreams without debt hanging over her. After Emily graduated from high school, she moved into an apartment near campus, and I rented a tiny studio on the outskirts of town. It was quiet, too quiet. I filled the space with the hum of old TV shows and the occasional call from Emily. She was busy. Classes, internships, a life of her own. I understood. When she married Brian a year before graduation, they both insisted I move in with them. Emily had smiled when she said, "Mom, living alone is no way for you to spend your golden years. We have a guest room, and it'll be nice to have you close." I hesitated. Nobody likes feeling like a burden, but they insisted so warmly that I accepted. At first, it felt like a blessing. The house was in a pleasant suburban neighborhood, full of maple trees and neatly trimmed lawns. My room was small but comfortable, with a view of the garden. I told myself I was lucky. After all, not everyone gets to live close to their child after they've built their own life. I believed I was wanted there, part of the family, not just an addition. But slowly, I noticed the invisible boundaries. They weren't rules in writing, just unspoken expectations. The first came about the kitchen. One evening, after making myself a late cup of tea, Brian smiled politely but reminded me, "Oh, we usually like to keep the kitchen clear after 8. Helps us keep things tidy." I laughed it off and agreed. It didn't seem like a big deal. Next was the living room. I'd always enjoyed watching TV in the evenings, but I started to notice my shows didn't fit into their schedule. Emily gently suggested I could watch in my room to give them space for couple time. Then came the subtle restrictions about guests. I once mentioned an old friend might visit, and Emily hesitated. It might be better if we meet them at a cafe instead, to keep things simple. I told myself it was reasonable. Young couples like their privacy. Still, every small change left me feeling more like a polite visitor than a true member of the household. But I didn't complain. After all, I was the one staying in their home, or at least that's how they framed it. Emily and I still had moments of closeness. We'd cook together on weekends, sharing old recipes. She'd ask me for advice about her career or what to wear for an event, but even those moments became less frequent. Slowly, conversations that used to be between just the 2 of us now happened with Brian present, or not at all. Financial topics, something we used to discuss openly, shifted almost entirely to Brian. If Emily needed help budgeting or planning, she'd defer to him. At first, I thought it was just part of their married life. But part of me wondered if my role in her life was quietly shrinking. One evening over dinner, the 3 of us were chatting idly. Brian was talking about a neighborhood committee he'd joined. Out of nowhere, he said, "We have to keep the image of a modern family. It's important for our social circle." I froze for a moment, unsure what he meant. The comment was so casual, but there was something about it that made me uncomfortable, A modern family sounded nice, but why did it sound like it excluded me? I glanced at Emily, but she just smiled and changed the subject. I told myself not to read too much into it. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe I was being sensitive. Still, as I cleared the table that night, I felt a faint unease, like there was an invisible line in this house I wasn't meant to cross. The graduation ceremony had been marked on my calendar for months. For years, I had pictured the moment. Emily walking across the stage in her cap and gown, her name announced to the audience, her smile finding me in the crowd. I imagined the applause, the hugs afterward, maybe even a photo of the two of us. Me, the proud mother who had carried her here through every late-night shift, every sacrifice. A week before the big day, Emily sat down beside me at the kitchen table. She looked cheerful, almost too cheerful as she sipped her coffee. "Mom," she began, "I need to talk to you about seating for the ceremony. Brian's parents and his sister are coming, and there's limited space in the front section, so we were thinking maybe you could sit a few rows back. You'll still have a great view, and afterward we'll all celebrate together." Her words hit me harder than I expected. A few rows back didn't sound like much, but I'd imagined being close enough to see her expression clearly. My heart sank, but I didn't want to make a scene. I forced a smile. "That's fine, honey. I'm just happy to be there," I said. She looked relieved, kissed my cheek, and went about her day. That night, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter where I sat. What mattered was seeing her graduate. What mattered was her happiness. I told myself not to dwell on it. The night before the ceremony, I couldn't sleep. I got up for a glass of water, careful to stay quiet so I wouldn't wake anyone. As I passed the living room, I heard Brian's voice. He was on the phone. "Yes, everything has to be perfect tomorrow," he was saying. "We can't let her mom's financial situation overshadow anything. This is Emily's day. The family image has to be, clean." I froze, my hand still on the banister. Financial situation? Overshadow? The words stung, though I didn't fully understand their meaning. It felt like there was a part of the celebration I wasn't supposed to touch, a truth I wasn't meant to be part of. I returned to my room, lying awake until dawn. The morning of the graduation, I dressed carefully in my best clothes. I picked up a bouquet of Emily's favorite white lilies and tucked a small gift into my bag. At the venue, I followed the usher's instructions to my seat, several rows back, just as Emily had said. From my seat, I could see the stage, though the graduates were small figures in the distance. Brian's family was up front, all smiles and polite chatter. I sat alone, clutching the bouquet, my heart pounding with anticipation. When Emily's name was called, I stood, applauding as loud as I could. She looked radiant, her smile wide as she crossed the stage. I told myself this was enough. Seeing her succeed was enough. Then came the speeches. Emily stepped up to the podium, her voice confident as she began to thank those who had supported her journey. "I wouldn't be here without my incredible husband, Brian, and his wonderful family, who have been my rock these past few years," she said. "And of course, my friends, my professors, and someone who has been such an inspiration to me." I leaned forward slightly, waiting for my name. She smiled toward Brian's mother. "Margaret, you've shown me what it means to be strong, compassionate, and generous. Thank you." Applause filled the auditorium. My hands felt numb. I clapped anyway, my face frozen in what I hoped looked like pride. Inside, my chest tightened as though someone had wrapped a band around my ribs. She didn't say my name, not once. I sat through the rest of the ceremony in a haze, my bouquet untouched on my lap. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that maybe she'd just forgotten in the moment. But a deeper part of me knew it hadn't been a mistake. After the ceremony, outside among the crowd, Emily found me. She hugged me tightly, her cap slightly askew. "Thank you for everything, Mom," she whispered, so softly I could barely hear it over the noise. I pulled back slightly, searching her face. "Why didn't you say that up there?" I asked quietly. Her smile faltered for just a moment. "It was complicated," she said. "I'll explain later. But today's supposed to be happy, okay?" I nodded, forcing another smile. But as I stood there, watching her laugh with Brian's family, the lilies still in my hand, I felt something deep inside me shift. This day, the day I had dreamed of, wasn't what I thought it would be. And though I didn't know it yet, it was the beginning of something far bigger than hurt feelings. It was the start of me seeing the truth I had ignored for far too long. In the days after the graduation, the house felt different. It wasn't just me. Emily and Brian seemed different too. Their voices lowered when I walked into the room. The cheerful invitations to join them for dinner became less frequent. When I did sit at the table, I felt like a decoration, a polite figure placed at the side to fill space, not to truly be part of the gathering. At one Sunday brunch, I watched from my chair as Brian's parents dominated the conversation, Emily leaning in with bright laughter. No one asked me about my week, my life, or even my thoughts. I stirred my coffee, my mind drifting. Later that afternoon, as I carried the dishes to the kitchen, I paused near the back hallway. Brian's voice floated from the den. "I just want to make sure we keep our family image solid," he was saying to a friend on the phone. "The last thing we need is her mom overshadowing everything. This is about us, our life, our success." I stood frozen for a moment, my fingers tightening around the dish towel. Her mom, overshadowing. The words felt like ice water down my spine. I backed away quietly, my mind buzzing. I told myself maybe I'd misheard, but the tone was unmistakable. That night, I went to my room, intending to distract myself with a book. But as I reached for my reading glasses, something on my desk caught my eye, a stack of mail. Most of it was junk, but one envelope bore the university's seal. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a letter addressed to the family of Emily Anderson Baker. It was a formal thank you note expressing gratitude for the generous financial contributions that had allowed Emily to complete her degree. The letter explicitly named the family of Emily and Brian Baker as the benefactors. My stomach dropped. There was no mention of me. Not as Linda Baker, not as her mother, not at all. I sat on the edge of my bed, the letter trembling in my hands. The money had come from me. Every payment, every tuition check, my savings, my sacrifices. And yet, in the eyes of the university, I didn't exist. That was the first crack in the picture-perfect facade. Over the next few days, I felt a quiet determination growing. I had lived in the shadows long enough. If they wanted to erase me, I needed to know just how far it went. When Emily left for work and Brian headed out to meet a client, I sat down at my small desk with my old laptop. I logged into my bank account, scrolling through the transactions for the past 4 years. Every tuition payment was there. 4 years of large withdrawals, all made from my account. Not a single one from Emily. Not a single one from Brian. I felt my chest tighten, but I kept going. Next, I dug through old emails. I searched for anything related to the university's financial office. That's when I found it. An email from Emily to the registrar, sent over a year ago. "For all financial correspondence, please use the address associated with my husband and me. We'd like all acknowledgments to be addressed to the family of Emily and Brian Baker to reflect our household's support." Household support. I stared at the words until they blurred. It wasn't just the ceremony. It wasn't just a simple oversight. My name had been deliberately removed from the records, from the narrative, from the story of her success. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. I had known Brian was focused on appearances, but Emily had chosen this too. Still, part of me clung to the hope that maybe there was an explanation. Some misunderstanding. The following week, I drove to the university under the pretense of returning a book to the library. While there, I stopped by the alumni office. I introduced myself casually to a staff member, asking a few harmless questions about Emily's class records. "That's a lovely family," the woman said brightly. Brian was always so proud to talk about how he supported Emily through school. Not many husbands are so generous with tuition, especially while starting their own careers. Her words landed like a blow. Brian, proud of supporting Emily? He hadn't paid a single cent. I left the office with a polite smile plastered on my face, but inside my emotions churned. Hurt, anger, and a growing clarity. They hadn't just failed to thank me, they had rewritten the story entirely. This wasn't just about a graduation, this was about being erased, and I wasn't going to stay erased forever. The drive home from the university felt endless. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, my mind spinning with the staff members' casual words. Brian had been telling everyone he'd paid for Emily's education. I'd known he was a man obsessed with appearances, but this was more than vanity. This was deceit. That night, I waited until the house was quiet. In my room, I pulled out the folders I kept in the bottom drawer of my dresser. Years of financial records, tuition invoices, bank statements. I laid them out on the bed, arranging them chronologically. The truth stared back at me in black and white. Every payment to the university was mine. But there was more I needed to know. My gut told me this web was bigger than just graduation speeches. Over the next week, I paid closer attention to the dynamics in the house. Brian was nervous, distracted, taking calls in the den with the door closed. Emily, too, seemed tense, avoiding eye contact when I mentioned anything about the ceremony. One evening, when they were both out, I found myself in the home office. A stack of documents sat carelessly on Brian's desk. I hesitated, then opened the top folder. Credit card statements, overdrawn accounts, and there, transfers from Emily's personal savings to Brian's investment accounts. My chest tightened as I skimmed the dates. The transfers matched the same months I had made the tuition payments. Brian hadn't just failed to contribute. He had been borrowing from Emily, money that could have been hers alone, and losing it in failed ventures. And Emily had covered for him. I sat in the quiet office, my hands trembling. Why? Why would she risk her integrity to protect him? The answer came quickly and bitterly. To maintain the image, the perfect young couple, the successful husband, the supportive wife, and me, the silent mother in the background. I was ready to close the folder when another document caught my eye, a property tax statement. My breath caught. The address was the house we were sitting in, and the name on the deed wasn't Brian's. It was mine. I pulled the file closer, my heart pounding. I hadn't realized it, but when I sold my old home years ago, I had rolled part of the funds into purchasing this property as security for Emily's future. I had never changed the deed. The house still legally belonged to me. It was the first time in weeks I felt something other than hurt. I felt power. For years, I'd believed I had no place in their lives beyond the role they gave me. But this was leverage. That night, lying in bed, I formed the beginnings of a plan, not out of spite, but out of the desperate need to restore the truth and my dignity. Over the next few days, I began collecting evidence. I printed bank statements showing my tuition payments. I made copies of the deed to the house, the property tax statements, and the letter from the university naming the family of Emily and Brian as benefactors. I slipped everything into a plain manila folder, tucking it into the bottom of my suitcase. The graduation party was coming up, a gathering at the house for friends, extended family, and colleagues. I knew it would be the perfect place. No more whispered thanks, no more erasure. I decided my approach would be calm, deliberate. I wouldn't make a scene. I would simply speak the truth, with the evidence in hand. Still, I knew better than to rely on a single moment in case things didn't go as planned or if I lost my nerve. I prepared a backup. I wrote a letter. In it, I explained everything: the tuition payments, the falsified acknowledgments, Brian's financial missteps, the fact that the house belonged to me. I addressed it to the party guests and sealed it in an envelope marked, to be read if I cannot. I left the letter in my locked drawer with instructions for a trusted friend to deliver it if needed. Each night leading up to the party, I rehearsed in my head. I pictured the guests laughing over drinks, Emily radiant, Brian in his element, and then me stepping forward, not to destroy them, but to set the record straight. I wasn't the fragile mother sitting quietly in the back row anymore. I was the woman who had built this life for her daughter from the ground up, and I wasn't going to be erased from the story. The house buzzed with voices and music the afternoon of the party. Emily had outdone herself. Balloons in the school colors floated above the tables, platters of food lined the kitchen island, and guests flowed through the rooms, drinks in hand. Brian moved from group to group, laughing easily, basking in the glow of admiration. From my place in the corner, I watched it all unfold. Friends congratulated Emily, co-workers praised Brian, and every mention of their success tied neatly into the image they had built. To anyone looking in, it was the perfect picture of a modern, accomplished couple. I smiled politely, greeted acquaintances, and waited. At one point, Brian clinked his glass to quiet the room. "We just want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate Emily's achievement," he said, arm wrapped around her shoulders. "It's been such an incredible journey, and we couldn't have done it without the support of family and friends." He paused, his smile widening. "And of course, a special thanks to my parents for being there for us every step of the way." The room erupted in applause. I felt my fingers curl slightly around the glass I was holding. I stepped forward. "If I could just say a few words," I said, my voice clear but calm. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward me. Emily looked surprised. Brian's expression faltered just slightly before snapping back into a polite smile. "Of course, Mom," Emily said quickly. I moved to the center of the room, the manila folder in my hand. I looked around at the faces, friends, neighbors, Brian's family, a few of Emily's professors. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. "I am so proud of Emily today," I began. "I've been proud of her every day of her life. I've worked hard to give her every opportunity I could, and seeing her succeed has been worth every sacrifice." There was a murmur of agreement, some smiles. "But," I continued, "I think it's important for everyone here to understand the full story of how we got to this day." I opened the folder and took out the first set of papers, bank statements, neatly organized. These are the tuition payments made over the past 4 years. Every single one came from my account. Every dollar I had went to ensuring Emily could graduate debt-free. A ripple of whispers moved through the room. Emily's face flushed. Brian shifted uncomfortably. I set the papers on the table beside me. I don't share this to embarrass anyone. I share it because truth matters. And for too long, that truth hasn't been acknowledged. I reached back into the folder and pulled out another document. My voice remained calm, almost gentle. "This is the deed to the house we are standing in. Legally, it is still in my name. When I sold my home years ago, I put part of the proceeds into buying this one for Emily's future. I never transferred ownership. This house belongs to me." The room went silent. All the background music, the casual chatter, it all seemed to evaporate. I looked directly at Emily. "I've decided to sell it." Her eyes widened, a sharp intake of breath escaping her lips. Brian's smile vanished completely, replaced by something pale and tight. "This isn't about revenge," I said. "It's about reclaiming my place in this story. I've spent years being grateful just to be allowed a seat in the back, but that ends today." For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. Then came the reactions. Emily's face crumpled. "Mom, please, can we talk about this privately?" Her voice was tight, trembling. Brian stepped forward, forcing a chuckle. "Let's not make a scene. We're all family here. Surely there's been some misunderstanding." I held up the deed. "The misunderstanding is thinking you can rewrite history without consequences." Gasps rippled through the room. A couple of Brian's friends exchanged awkward glances. His parents stood rigid, lips pressed tight. Brian tried again. Emily's my wife. We've built this life together. Whatever arrangements there were, surely they were gifts, not conditions. They were sacrifices, I said, my voice steady. And I made them freely. But gifts don't mean erasure. I didn't do this to see my name scrubbed from her story. Emily covered her face, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to be like this, she said, her voice cracking. I thought it would be easier this way. For Brian, for us. I felt the ache in my chest, but I also felt the solid ground beneath me for the first time in years. Easier for you, I said softly. Harder for me. There was no shouting, no slammed doors, just a deep, heavy silence. I gathered the papers, placed them back into the folder, and straightened. I'll make arrangements for the house in the coming weeks, I said. You'll have time to decide what's next. I turned toward the door, my steps measured. The room stayed quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. As I reached the threshold, I paused, looking back at Emily. I hope someday you'll understand that telling the truth isn't about humiliation. It's about respect. For me. For you. For us. And then I stepped outside. The summer air cool against my face, leaving behind a house full of silence. The weeks after the party moved quickly. I met with a realtor, arranged the sale of the house, and quietly began packing my things. There was no drama, no shouting matches, just the slow and steady dismantling of the life I had shared with Emily and Brian. I found a small apartment across town. It wasn't fancy, but it had something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. The place had 2 sunny windows that looked out onto a row of maple trees, and when the wind blew, the leaves rustled like whispers of reassurance. On moving day, I carried the last box up the narrow stairs myself. I set it down in the middle of the living room and looked around at the bare walls. There was a peace in the emptiness, a clean slate waiting to be filled with nothing but my own choices. Emily called twice that first week. The first time, her voice was hesitant, unsure. Mom, I wanted to say I'm sorry. For the ceremony. For everything. I listened, my heart aching, but my voice was calm. I hear you, Emily, but apologies don't erase what happened. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. There was silence on the other end before she said, I understand. The second time she called, she asked if she could visit. I agreed, but I set the boundary clearly. We'll meet at the cafe near my place. It's better that way for now. We talked over coffee, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. She didn't try to justify Brian's actions this time. She didn't even try to defend her own. She just listened. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Brian didn't call. I didn't expect him to. The last time I'd seen him at the party, his face had been pale and his jaw clenched. I suspected he wanted to avoid me, and perhaps the reality of the truth I had brought into the light. For the first time in decades, I wasn't someone's wife, someone's mother living under their roof. I was just me, and that felt good. I settled into my new life slowly, savoring the small freedoms. I could cook at midnight if I wanted to. I could invite friends over without asking anyone's permission. I could leave the kitchen a mess or clean it until it gleamed. Either way, it was my choice. Some evenings, I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sun set through the trees. The quiet no longer felt lonely. It felt like space I had earned. I thought a lot about the years I had given to Emily, about the sacrifices I had made. I didn't regret them, but I understood something now that I hadn't before. Sacrifice should have limits. When you give without boundaries, people can start to see your giving as a resource, not a gift. I realized I had spent too long thinking my value was in what I could provide, money, time, effort. But my value had always been in who I was. I began to rebuild my sense of self in small ways. I joined a book club at the local library. I took long walks in the mornings. I even started volunteering at a community center, teaching basic cooking classes. Each new step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I had set aside for too long. One afternoon, Emily called again. Her voice was stronger this time. "Mom, I know things will never be the same, but I want you to know I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about truth, about respect." I smiled faintly. "That's good, Emily. It's the first step. I want you to know I'm proud of you," she said softly. That caught me off guard. For so many years, I had waited for her to say she was proud of me, and here it was, quiet, genuine, without an audience. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. In the months that followed, life settled into a rhythm. The apartment became warm and familiar. I decorated the walls with framed photos, some of Emily as a child, some of places I wanted to visit. They weren't reminders of what I'd lost. They were reminders of who I'd always been. I thought often about the message I wished someone had told me years ago. If you don't set your own value, someone else will decide it for you. And more often than not, they will underestimate it. It became a quiet mantra I carried with me. As summer turned to fall, I sat on my balcony one crisp morning, the light slanting through golden leaves. I thought about the path that had brought me here, the sacrifices, the betrayals, the quiet moments of revelation. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't even feel triumphant. I just felt at peace. I knew there were women like me everywhere. Women who had given everything to their families, only to find themselves diminished, overlooked, or erased. I wanted them to know it didn't have to end that way. If someone was listening, maybe Emily, maybe a stranger, I would tell them, "Your love is valuable. Your sacrifice is valuable. But so are you. Don't wait for someone else to decide your worth. You have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to take up space. You have the right to be seen." I took a sip of my tea, the warmth spreading through me. The sun broke fully over the rooftops, spilling light into my small apartment. I let it wash over me, a quiet smile tugging at my lips. For the first time in a long time, I felt like my life belonged entirely to me. And that was enough.